Thanks everyone for joining us. We will go ahead and get started here in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining us. We still have a number of people joining the meeting, so we are going to get started in the next 1 to 2 minutes. All right, thanks so much everyone for joining us today as we discuss the hottest issue that's facing private practices and arguably to have ever challenged private practices, and that's the growth of third parties. For those of you who aren't familiar with Pivot Hearing, we are the leading practice development services group, and we exist to help hearing care professionals grow their practices with fresh, relevant mentoring and execution. Our team is composed of audiologists, hearing instrument specialists, and business people, and our work is based on the real-world success we have in our own multi-location practice here in the North Bay area of San Francisco, along with the 120 or so practices that we work with across the US and Canada. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We do have a lot of information to cover today. So as we go, please feel free to drop any questions or comments in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom interface, and we'll make sure to leave some time at the end to answer those. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Will Dials.
Thanks, Chelsea. All right. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Yeah, my name is Will Dials, and I'm a hearing aid dispenser and the general manager of Kenwood Hearing Centers. As Chelsea just mentioned, it's a 6-location practice in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm also a practice consultant for Pivot Hearing, which gives me the opportunity to work with practice owners all over the country, which really informs our perspective on this issue and really many others that are impacting the industry. So I'm a 5th-generation hearing care professional, and I feel really fortunate to carry on the family tradition of providing excellent hearing healthcare while simultaneously running successful businesses. And a quick disclosure, I just would like to mention that I'm not a lawyer, and some of the things that we're talking about here today involve contracts and agreements with insurance companies and third parties. And just to be clear, you should always obtain legal counsel before making any decision with regards to these types of issues. Okay, so yeah, the growing presence of managed care in the hearing care space, and the disruptions that that's caused to the traditional model of hearing aid dispensing is arguably, the most important area of focus for those of us in the private practice space. You'll probably hear me throw around a few terms today: managed care, third party, TPA, et cetera. Just to clarify, I will be using these terms interchangeably in case there's any confusion. So in this presentation, we're going to get into some of the background for how we got into the position that we're in, the mostly negative impacts that this development has had on the business, on our businesses, and sometimes even our patients. And then we'll evaluate several potential responses that we can employ. So there have been many disruptions over the years to the way we conduct business. Vertical integration in the form of manufacturers acquiring a large retail footprint, online, and some other kind of pseudo retail models that have developed over the years, and of course the proliferation of hearing aids sold in big box retailers. So most of these past disruptions have something in common, with this particular issue we're talking about today, which is managed care, in that they all offer patients lower prices than the traditional retail prices in the private practice setting, which in our opinion, and I think most of us probably agree, provides patients with the best level of care and service available. So that said, if cheap hearing aids were the answer to the relatively low penetration rates in the industry, I think we would have all been unemployed long ago. So, but make no mistake, though, there are some key differences here that make the managed care disruption a much more formidable challenge. So TPAs are inherently more dangerous because they have the built-in credibility of being associated with a patient's health insurance plan, which in our demographic is typically Medicare. It could be a Medicare Advantage plan or a Medicare supplement. Either way, these managed care companies get to hitch their wagon to the force that is Medicare, which happens to be one of the most popular government programs in existence. So I hope to leave you all with a proper understanding of the nature of this challenge, what we're up against, but also some hopeful strategies for how those of us in private practice can overcome it and succeed. Okay, so when you take a step back and evaluate the managed care landscape, it's fairly easy to view private practices as kind of the ultimate underdog. You have the US federal government in the form of Medicare working arm in arm with some of the largest healthcare corporations in the world, with the seemingly full support of the hearing aid manufacturers that we all purchase our products from. Obviously, one of the key strategies and goals for the hearing aid manufacturers is to increase their hearing aid volume. So by participating and even in some cases acquiring managed care networks, they gain the ability to have some control over the flow of their products in this growing segment of the market. So this coalition of well-funded entities, we like to refer to as the managed care industrial complex. They have virtually infinite capital and resources. And in some context, that would place us as generally small independent private practices at a huge disadvantage. And this is not an indictment or a criticism of the hearing aid manufacturers. This market is growing, or this segment of the market rather is growing. And as we'll get into shortly, they're just more or less responding to some market incentives. It would probably be irresponsible for them to ignore this trend. So that said, a sober understanding of this reality must inform the way we think about the issue and any kind of strategy that we might bring to the table. It's easy to become discouraged, but we actually have a much more optimistic view of the future of private practice. Those of us with mature and established practices actually have some huge advantages that we believe will allow us to thrive in the face of this challenge. We'll get into more in this later in the presentation, but the key to any strategy for competing is all about determining where our advantages lie and then leaning into those strengths. And we believe that this can be done in a way that will deliver both, good business results as well as excellent patient care. Okay, so the single biggest driver in the growth of managed care is likely the growth in Medicare Advantage, also known as Medicare Part C. So as of 2020, 39% of all Medicare beneficiaries opted for a Medicare Advantage plan. So by definition, Medicare Advantage is a type of health insurance plan that provides Medicare benefits through a private sector health insurance company. Remaining Medicare beneficiaries who do not elect an Advantage plan will oftentimes purchase a Medicare supplement in addition to their traditional Medicare. So 72% of Advantage plans, and certainly a great deal of the supplements, offer some form of hearing aid coverage. So as those of us in private practice know, coverage can be defined generously. So with some plans are going to offer a discount or a copay on hearing aids, and others will actually have dollar benefits that sometimes are exclusively available, only, when used through a given managed care plan. So it's our opinion that given the trends we see, it's entirely likely that at some point in the near future, 100% of Medicare supplement and Advantage plans will include some sort of hearing aid coverage. So what does that mean from a private practice perspective? That at some point in the not too distant future, that just about every patient who comes through our doors will have a managed care hearing aid option available to them if they choose to go that route. And as I mentioned earlier, it's important to keep in mind that the managed care industrial complex, the entities within it, are just responding to some market incentives. And to this point, here is some data from a market track survey that asked consumers what would motivate a hearing aid purchase sooner. The number one factor was having insurance that will cover some or more of the cost. Medicare Advantage and the supplement plans are a huge business. It's a very competitive market. So it's no surprise that these companies are responding accordingly to what their customers, otherwise known as policyholders, are looking for. The data shown here reinforces that position. More insurance involvement is something that our patients are looking for. We've all heard the question over the years many times, why doesn't Medicare pay for hearing aids? While not technically true, as traditional Medicare does not, in fact, cover hearing aids, the effective answer to that question is that Medicare does cover hearing aids, sorta. And a little more background here. This trend is not only impacting the hearing care industry. Medicare Advantage plans are offering all sorts of different types of benefits like vision and dental, even meals and transportation. So this just speaks to the competitive nature of the space. And like the manufacturers have one goal, a singular goal of moving their products. Insurance companies have a goal of selling more policies and generating more profit. And that's about it. Now, our goal on the private practice side is to treat as many patients as possible with the best professional care possible while delivering profit to the bottom line. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm lucky to get to work with practice owners all over the country through my work with Pivot Hearing. And one thing that I've noticed is that the degree to which third parties have impacted any given market is pretty varied. In some areas of the country, the saturation of managed care is overwhelming. And there are a number of variables and possible explanations as to why this is, but managed care penetration rates seem to correlate with a higher, Medicare Advantage penetration rates seem to correlate with a higher saturation of managed care. So if you happen to work in one of the red states that you see on the map here, it's likely that you are encountering many patients with managed care benefits. The states in red have a Medicare Advantage penetration of 40% or more. So again, more Medicare Advantage patients in an area generally means more patients with managed care hearing aid coverage, and that's just something we have to deal with. Okay, so what kind of impacts is this having on our businesses or our practices? If you think about this in terms of pros and cons, the cons make up a relatively long and easy to define list. So let's briefly touch on a couple of positive things that managed care can do for your practice. Third parties can help you fill your schedule with new patients at essentially zero marketing cost. And they can also provide an affordable treatment options for certain patients with financial constraints. But that's about it. But these things can be kind of a big deal. If you're a new practice without a large database, if you started from scratch within the past couple of years, you're probably not in a position to turn away any patients or very few. So if you're in this position, I would recommend that you absolutely, use the third-party system, use third parties to fill your schedule and help build up your database and therefore kind of build up your business. And this brings us to an important point. If you're in a situation where participating in third parties makes good business sense for you, then of course you should do it. The decision to participate or not is an individual one, and you will find no judgment here, depending on how you come down on that decision. Okay. So we've highlighted the obvious benefits from working with third parties. So let's move on to discuss some of the challenges that third parties can present to our business. So as business shifts or patients shift from private pay to third party, our margins are reduced. No surprise there. Some quick back of the napkin math shows that on average it takes 3 third party patients to equal the margin of 1 private pay patient historically. So another way to think about that is that we're being asked to work 3 times as hard to generate the margin that we're accustomed to. And the relationships that we develop over time with our patients, that's the backbone of any healthy practice. So when you do business with a third party, it can compromise your ability to do so. Have a look at this Yelp review, which I found on the Yelp page of one of the biggest third parties out there. And I'll just read the first couple sentences. Pushy commission salesperson, when I called to speak about my insurance benefits, would not listen to me. I repeatedly told him I simply wanted to find out more about the coverage and make my decision as to visiting my local family-owned audiologist or primary care group. Very unpleasant experience today is that how she closed that out. So this is just an example of how working with a third party can reflect poorly on your practice. So another consideration for those of you, considering an exit strategy is it's important to understand the impact of the valuation that third parties will have on your practice. So to get some more information on this, we reached out to our friend and colleague, Craig Castelli. He's the founder and CEO of Hill, a business brokerage firm that has about as much experience as anybody in this industry when it comes to mergers and acquisition. And here was his take on the issue. TPAs can provide short-term value to practices when they are properly utilized to fill excess calendar capacity without cannibalizing traditional patients. Too often, however, patients convert from private pay to utilizing a third-party benefit, eroding both revenue and profitability, which has a direct and negative impact on valuation. Further, the majority of transactions are still funded by hearing aid manufacturers, and hearing aids sold through third parties do not count towards loan repayments, reducing the amount of funding available for the practice and reducing the valuation as a result. And perhaps most importantly, I think we all intuitively understand that the third-party model for hearing aid dispensing gives patients suboptimal care, patient experience, and outcomes. And of course, this isn't true 100% of the time, as I'm sure the managed care model works just fine for a certain percentage of patients. That said, the reasons why this might not be ideal in terms of patient care are obvious. Third parties are, for the most part, a one-size-fits-all approach to hearing care. Patients' choices and options are limited. And they're forced into an unbundled fee for service model, which we're going to get into, more of an unbundled model, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. So given the very limited benefits, many obvious negative impacts, I think the most charitable way to look at a practice's relationship with managed care would be as a necessary evil. Okay. So we think that it is highly likely that the managed care model is going to grow in the future. It will probably evolve into more direct consumer offerings, which is something we're already seeing a bit of. It's important to recognize, though, that these managed care entities do not understand quality hearing healthcare, and they do not have our interest as private practice, owners at heart. They will try to go around us, at any chance if possible. And so while everything I've said so far today doesn't paint a particularly rosy picture, we believe there is reason for optimism. There's ample opportunity for practices to fortify our positions in the market with a combination of sound business fundamentals, as well as developing some compelling alternatives to what the third parties are offering. And, we also have several assets and resources that the entities that make up the managed care industrial complex want and even need for their business models to succeed. They need and or desire our infrastructure, which is, our clinical settings for testing and fitting hearing aids, our professional expertise, the relationships we have with our patients, the organic referral sources that we've built over the years, as well as the human resources required to run a audiology or hearing aid dispensing practice. So for those of us with well-established and mature practices, I'd like to make the argument that they, being the managed care companies, need us more than we need them. So as I said earlier in the presentation, 72% of Medicare Advantage plans offer some sort of hearing aid coverage, generally through a third party. So why aren't 72% of all hearing aids dispensed in the country, going through this channel? And it's hard to pin down an exact number of how many units are going through third parties, but it's probably in the ballpark of 20% of total units in the US. So the units sold at the big box stores and the VA and to patients who are not on Medicare, do not account for this discrepancy. The statistic on this screen does, however. 57% of all Medicare beneficiaries do not review or compare their coverage options annually. So we think it's a fair assumption that these folks are not immediately calling that 800 number on the back of their insurance card when it comes time to pursue hearing healthcare or probably any sort of ancillary healthcare. These are patients who are coming into our practice as the result of all sorts of different, referral sources and marketing that we've done. And they will oftentimes purchase hearing aids outside of their hearing aid or outside of their insurance coverage, rather. So we think it's helpful to think of patients as existing on a continuum in terms of how they expect and want their insurance to participate in the process of obtaining hearing aids. So we created something that we like to call the Consumer Health Insurance Coverage Approach Continuum. Folks on the far left of this continuum are always going to explore their insurance coverage prior to seeking out healthcare. That probably applies to hearing aids and any other healthcare. Occasionally, I'll come across a patient who feels like they need to use their benefit, even when I've demonstrated that it might not be in their best interest to do so. And on the opposite side of that, this continuum, you have patients who even if they have coverage, they're not particularly concerned or interested in how their insurance participates. Cheap hearing aids available to them through their insurance is not going to motivate them. They're looking for something more. The folks in the middle to the right are, in general, the pool of patients that we see in a private practice or a private pay context, rather. These folks are going to choose a provider and make purchasing decisions based on other considerations. Could be that they've done their own research online. Perhaps they were referred by their physician or friend. These patients generally have lower price elasticities and are looking for something beyond a transaction when it comes to their hearing healthcare. So if they happen to have hearing aid coverage through their insurance, it's really more of a secondary or a tertiary issue. And as is the case with most things, the majority of patients are going to fall somewhere in the middle, where they might go either way between a private pay purchase or a managed care offering. So it's critical to understand that our marketing efforts need to reach as many of these folks as possible first. So when they call the 800 number on the back of their insurance card first, we all kind of know what happens. They'll be transferred or routed to a managed care company who will then refer that patient to an office, maybe yours, if your close rate or whatever other arbitrary ranking metric that they use is high enough. And at that point, the managed care company will have an overwhelming advantage in terms of making that sale. So in general, the patients in the middle to the right of the continuum are up for grabs in terms of private pay sales. The patients on the far left are a little harder to reach, but we're going to discuss some strategies here in a little bit to capture as much of that business as possible. But in reality, it's probably a good idea to accept that most of the folks on the left side of this continuum are going to call that 800 number first, and there probably isn't a whole lot we can do about it. So in the same way that patients exist on a continuum, the degree to which managed care has impacted any given practice can vary wildly. And as I mentioned earlier, I work with practices all over the country, and I can usually tell in fairly short order where a given practice falls on this continuum based on our conversations. Some practices have strong fundamentals, which include organic sources of new patients, an active and a nurtured database, and they don't necessarily have a strong need, at least, to see third-party patients. So if you're on the right side of this continuum, you can probably run your business profitably without participating in third parties. Or if you do participate, the impact is more akin to a minor inconvenience versus an existential threat to your business. So practices in this situation, in our opinion, should likely consider strategic divestment from the managed care networks, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later. And on the opposite side of the continuum, there are practices that have virtually zero private pay business. Nearly all the revenue is associated with third parties. And unfortunately, I talk to practices in this situation fairly frequently. This is obviously a very vulnerable position to be in. What happens if the third party stop referring? And this can happen for a myriad of reasons, many of which are not in your control. If you think back to the idea of the managed care industrial complex, what if one of the manufacturers who owns a third party acquires your competitor? Where do you think those referrals are going to go? And what if the third parties send you a bunch of non-serious hearing aid candidates and your close rate drops? Through no fault of your own, you could be left out in the cold there. Okay, so given that this issue of managed care is not a particularly new problem, a host of different strategies and topics have been discussed over the years to address the issue. So let's spend some time going over some of these. One option would be to ignore these trends, towards more and more insurance involvement in the hearing aid industry, and choose not to participate in third parties while maintaining, similar kind of retail pricing strategies. So, in other words, business as usual. If you're on the right side of the continuum from the previous slide, you can probably afford to do this for at least the near term. But as the growth in managed care inevitably increases, it's probably not sustainable to maintain a pricing strategy with significantly higher price points than what is being offered by the third parties. If you look at the growth in the industry, big box units are growing, third party units are growing, and the VA is more or less about the same. But the combined growth of these channels is outpacing the industry in total. So what that tells me is that the private practice units as a percentage of the total are declining. The opposite approach to business as usual would be to go all in on third parties. So this would look something like the majority or all of your referrals and revenues, being generated by third parties. And as I said earlier, there are many risks associated with this strategy. You have vulnerabilities that include undiversified referral sources, little to no innate practice value, as well as basically no control over the fees that you generate and the service that you're required to provide to these patients. So a practice that would take this approach is ultimately at the whim of a much larger, sometimes antagonistic entity, which is not a great place to be. Okay, another common strategy that I hear about all the time is that something along the lines of, if we all band together, TPAs will go away, or something like that. Unfortunately, this strategy is dead on arrival. Getting all providers in the country, or even a given state, is to agree, that would be impossible. And even if the impossible were to be achieved, it wouldn't really matter. The manufacturers have acquired so much brick and mortar retail that over the years that there will always be some places for these patients to go. So that said, divestment from the managed care system can be an effective strategy for an individual practice as long as you're coupled with strong fundamentals and a compelling alternative to offer patients. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. And there are an increasing number of movements taking place with the goal to disrupt the third-party channel through legal and regulatory efforts. So it's important to remember that private practices are the ultimate underdog in this battle, and it may not be well advised to pursue combat on their turf. While it might make sense to support some of these efforts, and we certainly do if it helps private practices, there's reason to be skeptical that this is a viable strategy. Okay, another option is to adjust your pricing strategies to better compete with the downward pressure on pricing that managed care has brought to us. Historically, we've always been able to drop down in technology level to find an acceptable price point for any given patient. The obvious problem with this approach, though, today is that even a marginally sophisticated consumer is not going to find that particularly compelling with premium technology available through at big box retailers, as well as through many of these third parties. So if we are going to develop some sort of a compelling alternative offer to patients, we have to make sure that the technology that we're working with stacks up. Another way to adjust pricing to better compete with managed care would be to adopt more of an unbundled model. So in this approach, you'd set your hearing aid retail prices more comparably to that of the managed care offerings, and then attempt to recoup some of the lost revenue by monetizing your service. Now, reasonable minds can disagree on this issue, and I'm sure some of you do. But we believe that it's likely that when you employ an unbundled strategy, you're going to have a good chance of having inferior patient outcomes. And there's evidence to suggest that it leads to significantly inferior patient experience. So to this point, Dan Ariely is a professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University. And he has written a lot on the psychological phenomenon known as the pain of paying, which is to say that each time a consumer is forced to pay, pain is inflicted. He states that the biggest increase in the pain of paying is when we switch from paying nothing to paying something. In other words, there's not a linear relationship between pain and spending money. Going from $0 to anything is what hurts the most, according to Dan. An unbundled model necessitates many smaller transactions rather than one larger transaction, which, according to his research, inflicts increased pain on the consumer, which this just reminds me of something that one of my favorite reps said a while back. He said, the only thing worse than a transaction in a hearing aid office is many transactions in a hearing aid office. And I think there's just some truth to that. So if we think about this, in terms of what this means in our practices, I think it's a safe assumption that patients will put off care and service if they know they will be charged. I think we've all seen it. It can be something very simple, like a clogged wax filter. If a patient has to pay $65 or something like that, they might not come in. And this is a worst case scenario for both the patient and the practice. At its core, unbundling takes the hearing aid fitting and pushes it into a transactional direction, which is a move away from the private practice's domain of advantage, which is, of course, patient care and service. Managed care companies will always have the competitive edge in terms of pricing to the patients. So competing on their terms is just going to become increasingly difficult. Now, to be fair, we have worked with practices that have been successful using an unbundled pricing strategy, and it's true that not all unbundling strategies are equally problematic. So if you're going to incorporate an unbundled pricing model, the insights here around this idea of the pain of paying need to be taken into account when developing your pricing strategy. If you think about our big box store competitors, they are in general providing a fully bundled offering to patients, and managed care companies are seemingly moving in that direction as well. And I'm sure you're all aware and heard about one particular third party recently increasing the service required after fitting from 3 visits to a full year. So in our opinion, they're simply responding to market incentives. And, we think patients do not really want a pay-as-you-go model. So unbundling seems like an answer to a question that no one is asking really. So unfortunately, each of the aforementioned strategic approaches to deal with managed care, they have shortcomings and limitations for private practice. It's critical to understand where private practice competitive advantages lie. And it's not really in changing the system, but rather leaning into our professional skills, expertise, and our brick and mortar assets. Okay. So much of what we've talked about today is outside of any of our control. I mean, the agreements made between insurance companies and third parties, with manufacturers and third parties in terms of the products and the price points that are going to be offered, and even how the federal government may or may not change, Medicare coverage of hearing aids. We also don't have any ability to influence the behavior or decisions of what any of our competitors in our local markets do. So what can we control is an important question. We see this, and there's 2 main categories of what we control: practice fundamentals and compelling alternatives for patients. So we like to break down practice fundamentals into a couple of categories. The first being patient experience. There are many ways to provide patients with a positive experience in our clinics, and I'm sure all of you that are in practice have ways to accomplish this. But in our practice, it's hard to find a better example than the hearing aid test drive. So this is a concept that we have embraced and included in just about all of our marketing and messaging to our patients. What it is basically a risk-free at-home trial with hearing aids with no deposit or down payment required. It allows patients to comfortably experience different hearing aids until we find the right product and price point for the patient. The response to this program is universally positive. And to this note, have a look at this Yelp review, which I think really captures the benefits from a patient's perspective. I'll give you a second to read it here. Okay. So when you provide a patient with a positive experience like this, or however you might do so in your practice, this is really the antithesis of buying cheap hearing aids through your insurance, which is more or less what a lot of the TPA offerings are at the end of the day. The other area of practice fundamentals we look at is patient flow, and that consists of both new patients and existing patients. And I almost consider them 2 businesses within your business. And the key here is to make sure that we have organic, diversified sources of new patients where patients are calling us, the practice, before they call that 800 number on the back of their insurance card. And it's critical. I think it's obvious, but it's critical to maintain engagement with our database of existing patients that we've built over the years. And so, this should be done regularly with educational material like newsletters, and, also letting your patients know about technology that might benefit them at least 2 to 3 times per year. So when you're strong in these areas, your practice is fortified, and not just from this threat of managed care, but really any other. Okay. So even if a practice has extremely strong fundamentals, and regardless of whether the practice participates in managed care plans, because so many patients have some sort of hearing aid coverage through a third party, you have to offer some sort of a compelling alternative to what these third parties are offering our patients. This should be designed to reach the patients who are in the middle to the left side of the consumer health insurance continuum, the folks who would otherwise have called the 800 number on the back of their card if we don't get them first. From a patient perspective, this compelling alternative will need to be value laden at a price point that is reasonably competitive with what they're being offered through their insurance company or their third party. As I mentioned earlier, it's also going to require premium or advanced technology to compete from a product perspective and also to deliver good patient outcomes. So the product needs to be bundled with care and service so that it competes with an increasingly bundled model from third parties. In which again, that shifts the battle to the domain where the private practices have the upper hand. And this compelling alternative also needs to be simple and mimic the offerings that the patients are being presented by some of the third parties, which generally feature limited choice, but easy to understand, attractive price points. So at Pivot Hearing, we have developed a program for our members that's called Access Hearing. We are also using this at our practice, Kenwood Hearing Centers, and it looks like this. We are offering premium and advanced product at the price points that you see on the screen, along with a fully bundled service package. With the way we have implemented the program with price points like this, we are generating roughly twice the margin of your average third-party fitting fee. And if this looks and feels kind of like some of the more popular managed care plans out there, it was set up that way by design. To be clear, I am not suggesting that you offer a patient who was referred by a third party something like this or any other direct purchase option. If you're a participating provider in a third party, you would be opening yourself up to all sorts of trouble. The idea here is to have a compelling alternative in place for patients who have called you, the practice, before that 800 number on the back of your card, and you're having a conversation with them first. So when a patient says something like, I received something in the mail from my insurance company stating that I can buy premium hearing aids for $9.99 per unit, I would respond with something like, Mrs. Jones, your insurance company has partnered with another entity which offers discounted hearing aids with limited service offerings. If you'd like to explore that option, I encourage you to do so. However, we have developed a plan that we believe provides comparable value, excellent technology, and most importantly, no need to compromise in terms of your care and service. So far, the response has been pretty universal, and that is, patients say something like, I'd rather do business with you directly. So, and even if the patient is looking at a little bit more out-of-pocket expense than what their third party is offering, the differentiation here in terms of care and service more than completely justifies it. Okay, so it's probably obvious in looking at this sheet that if you were to implement something like this in your practice, you'd need the ability to acquire, premium and advanced products at lower prices than you are probably currently paying. So at Pivot Hearing, we have an agreement with one of our hearing aid manufacturers, and we're talking to several others. There'll be a second one added here at some point. But we have these products available at price points where you can implement a program like this and still make a healthy profit. So better pricing on hearing aids isn't the sole answer to this problem, but it certainly is a prerequisite for any sort of strategy that we might employ for dealing with it. And then here's just another patient-facing document that we use from time to time. And the purpose of this sheet is just simply a high-level comparison of the Access Hearing program versus some of the more common third-party plans out there. The goal is not to get into an apples-to-apples comparison or even worse, some sort of a price direct comparison. This is simply just to visually highlight the advantages that we in private practice can deliver that a managed care offering simply can't. Sometimes simple displays like this can help augment your sales pitch and maybe dissuade someone from going down the managed care path. Okay. So earlier I talked about the fact that collective action in the form of all hearing care providers across the US refusing to participate in the third party programs, how that's not really a viable solution to this problem. However, when a high quality individual practice in a given market stops participating, that does deliver a real shot to the third parties, especially in markets where there aren't many other good options for the third parties to send patients. So while I don't think collective action will work at the national or even state level, I do believe that as a hyper local strategy, it can be quite impactful. If you divest from the third party programs and perhaps other practices in your markets do so over time, patients in your market will increasingly be referred to the lower quality practices, many of which are plagued by high turnover and other human resource issues. As patients have less than ideal experiences when going this route, getting hearing aids through their insurance benefits, they might be less likely to choose this route in the future. They might even share that experience with their friends and family. So the impact to the third parties is lower conversion rates, higher return for credit rates, and fewer opportunities to make that second and third time sale to a patient. So when you stop participating in the managed care plans, it also makes your compelling alternative that much more compelling. You no longer have to compare your offering directly to any other. You can just say something that you do, like you do not participate in those plans, but that you've developed something that delivers comparable technology with superior care for the patient that would allow them to deal with you directly and locally. And it also helps to protect the reputation that you've built for your practice, by being able to offer the right product for any given patient, coupled with the care and service that you believe is in their best interests. And there will be no influence from an outside company that could potentially hinder that process or that development of that relationship. So we don't advocate for collective action, but we do support each individual practice making the decision that's right for his or her business. But we believe that strategic divestment can and should be a goal for any individual practice. And divestment doesn't necessarily mean that you have to drop all third parties or you might pick and choose the ones that make sense for you and your business and your market. It also doesn't mean that what the decision that you make today has to be the decision you stay with forever. If it makes sense to participate today, then great, go for it. But if it makes less sense a year or two from now, you can make adjustments to your strategy as you go. Okay, to wrap things up here, I think it's clear that the managed care is here to stay, and it's only going to grow. Perhaps there will be a plateau in growth at some point in the future, but there's certainly more room to grow. And many of the strategic responses that private practices have considered or employed fall short of really meaningfully addressing the problem, or doing so in a way that would actually fortify our businesses and maintain high quality care for our patients. So the keys to fortification amidst the managed care threat are strong practice fundamentals and a compelling alternative for patients. The compelling alternative needs to deliver the attractive elements of what the third parties are offering, while simultaneously satisfying your practice financial requirements and patient care standards. Now, there may always be some tension between business and patient care needs, but a solution like this, the Access Program, threads the needle well. So when your practice strengthens its fundamentals and develops or adopts a compelling alternative, you move to the right of that private practice continuum, which is where you want to be. And as you move in that direction, strategic divestment starts to become a reality and something to really think about. And I think that's a very commendable and achievable goal to set for your practice. So our vision at Pivot Hearing is to fortify private practices to thrive in their market. And one example of how we are doing that is with our strategic consulting and solutions for this managed care challenge. So in closing here, I just want to leave you with our philosophy, which is when private practices put the care and experience of their patients at the center and build fortified business models around that, they will succeed no matter the competitive disruptions that arise. Start with patient care and business results will follow. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea for a few minutes before we dive into some Q&A.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Will. So as we wrap up here, I just want to read our mission statement, which is Pivot Hearing stands with private practices because we believe they provide the best patient care, and it is our vision to successfully fortify these practices to thrive in their local markets. As Will said, the key to your success now and in the future, despite the growth in third party and any other competitive threats that will arise, is to develop strong practice fundamentals. And that's exactly what Pivot Hearing does for private practices. The program that we've developed as a compelling alternative to what the third parties offer is just one example of the type of impactful, forward-thinking, real-world tools that we bring to practice owners. And we don't just bring ideas, we deliver lightning fast execution as well, so your practice can stay one step ahead of all of your competitors. We offer practice development services in 3 major categories. Offense, this is how we help you acquire new patients. Defense, these are the ways we help you nurture and engage your existing patient database, as well as defend against threats like the third-party one and any others that come our way. And coaching, this is the other practice management and support that we deliver to you and your team. As fellow practice owners and seasoned consultants, nobody offers better thinking around what it's going to take for private practices to succeed in the near, medium, and long term than Pivot Hearing. Nobody executes as quickly on the database decisions that we help you make so things get done well and quickly to move your business forward. The beautiful thing about our model is that working with Pivot Hearing likely won't cost you anything, and it may even save you money. We offer extremely competitive hearing aid pricing. You retain manufacturer perks and benefits that you already have in place, and there are no contracts, commitments, or minimums when you work with us. We'd love the chance to get to know you, your practice, and your market a little bit better to see if we can support you and help you grow. So you'll be receiving an email following this event, and it'll include a link where you can schedule a brief one-on-one meeting with our team. So we look forward to meeting you individually then. With that, I'm going to move on to the Q&A. So we have a number of questions here. One of the questions here is, what models are this premium and advanced? Like, are they a Phonak 90 and 70 or more like a 50-30? Will, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. Yeah. So we're not able to on this presentation tell you the models specifically or the price points. We can do that with if we get a conversation started and sign like a non-disclosure. We can get you that information. But it's I can say that it's more like the 90 and 70 than at lower levels of technology.
Yep. Okay, great. And here's a question from someone: at the pricing given and my least expensive premium price, my profit is only $579, about half of what I make with most third parties. So I can address that one. I think, yes, that has been the issue historically, which is why this program has been such a savior, right? Like Will said, cheap hearing aids isn't the total answer, but having very aggressive cost of goods for the professional so that you can maintain reasonable profitability is really critical in order to be successful with this type of program. And so that's what we're able to deliver. It's premium products, basically at price points you've probably never seen before, that allow you to be really competitive with the third parties. If you want to add anything, Will, let me know.
Yeah, I would just say that one way to think about this would be if the way we set it up, the margins are roughly double what you'd get on a fitting fee. So this is a patient that goes this route is not as profitable as a traditional premium sale, but it kind of splits the difference between your traditional premium margins and a third party fitting fee. So it's a step in the right direction, but no, absolutely maintaining those premium sales at higher price points is obviously a good goal for any private practice going forward.
Okay, great. Another question around which manufacturer is participating in the program. As Will said, we're not able to disclose that in this format, but anybody who's interested in learning more, there's a number of ways you can get in touch with us. You can go to our website and schedule a call. Like I said, we'll send everyone an email and follow up to this with a link to schedule, and we can have a discussion and we can sign a mutual NDA. And then at that point, we can share that type of information with you, which we would be more than happy to do. Okay, so another question here around whether we work with all manufacturers. I can answer that one. Yes, we do. We work with all of the big 6, 7, depending on how you count the Sonova brands. So yes, we work with all of the major manufacturers. And so you're able to acquire hearing aids through us across all those manufacturers at great prices. And then this one manufacturer in particular at exceptionally low prices. And then, as Will mentioned, we're going to be adding at least one more manufacturer to the Access Hearing program in the coming weeks as well. Okay, here's a question. How do you have providers? Let's see, I'm trying to see if I understand this question. Oh, okay. How do you have providers tell you that the patient is truly a TPA patient to get that cost of goods? Okay, I can answer that one as well. The great thing about this program is that when you're signed up to use it, you are free to use it whenever and however you want. So, the impetus for the program design was the ability for private practices to compete with the third party plans. But because this is not truly like a benefit plan or anything like that, you do not have to show proof to Pivot Hearing or to the manufacturers or to anybody for that matter that the patient does have hearing aid coverage or an insurance benefit. In fact, you can actually use this program to compete with other low cost players like Costco or, anything like that. So there is no requirement to show proof. Obviously, I mean, everybody wants to keep in mind that the goal isn't to just like flat out lower your ASP like across all your sales. So finding a way to incorporate this program into your practice in a way that does not erode your highly profitable premium sales that you've got going, but that also delivers some improved margin versus fitting fees is the goal. It's something that we as both consultants and practice owners have done a lot of thinking and designing around. So that's the kind of thing that we can really help you with as far as implementing this program if you're interested. Okay, here's a great question. I'll probably have you answer this one, Will. So, are the premium products in the plan you offer the same as what you would offer to private pay patients? If so, it doesn't seem fair to private pay patients to get the same product at a significantly higher price.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is probably not 100%, but in general, the products that are in here are almost certainly not your go-to premium product. And that was set up that way by design so that you could differentiate between your $5,000-$6,000 sets of premium devices and these. So in the vast majority of cases, this is going to be a different hearing aid than what you're selling at those higher price points. So you don't have to worry about that ethical dilemma.
Okay, great. Here's another question, Will. This one is, we have tried a test drive concept in the past, but it was not successful as patients were not financially committed. So how is your test drive program different?
So to be honest, that's not generally been our experience. Usually, when we send people out with hearing aids on a test drive, and they say, how much do I have to pay you, or what do I have to sign? I say, no, nothing. Don't worry about it. Like, we'll see you next week and we'll check in. They're usually pleased with that, and I think they feel like, oh, you're trusting me. It's a good way to kind of establish rapport. So that's not been our experience, or I mean, it has happened, of course. There's a certain percentage of people that will take advantage, but it's a small percentage. And it kind of, when you embrace the hearing aid test drive strategy as a whole, you can kind of live with those, a small percentage of people who might take advantage of the program and who are not serious. So I hope that answers the question there.
Yeah, and it's a program we've used in our own practice and with dozens and dozens of practices across the country for many years. And I think, overall, people tend to see more sales, higher ASP, improved, some more subjective things like improved fit or confidence and things like that. So I think generally speaking, all of those pros outweigh, the occasional
Yeah,
con.
and the idea is to get more hearing aids on ears, so by going that route, all sorts of things are going to happen, but it kind of comes out in the wash where if you get more hearing aids on people's ears, you're going to have better results generally. So
Here's kind of a follow-up question to that one, Will. Someone asking if you only use demo mode devices for test drives.
We strongly try to, and yes, for the most part, yes. And we think that's really the most responsible financial way to do so. If you're actually using invoiced hearing aids, it's just a lot riskier. So yeah, demos are a critical component to really going all in on the test drive.
Okay, here's another question about the test drive. I'll stick with these for now. Do you take credit card imprint or some other safety check upon checkout for test drive?
No, we don't. We have some of our Pivot Hearing members do. So I don't think that that's a problem to do. So I think that's a very reasonable request, or requirement rather. But no, we in our practice don't do that. And I mean, they are giving you their address and information. So it's, that kind of the likelihood of someone running off with your hearing aids is extremely low. In my 10 years of working in the clinic, has happened to me once. So I kind of live with it. What's more likely is someone will lose one in go to a hospital or something like that will happen. Those things happen. So that's why it's nice when they're wearing demos. It's not a huge financial hit when something like that comes up.
Okay, here's a question that's a little bit back to the original topic. So, how do you ethically offer a product in your two-tiered plan that offers hearing aids that aren't as good as the ones you offer to private pay patients? Our goal is to help every patient the best we can. Not sure how to differentiate that. Do you want to take that, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that the hearing aids that have a retail price point of $5,000 or $6,000 for a binaural pair um, are different from what you're selling at a lower price point. So the plan is designed so that you can easily do that. So that these are great products that you can absolutely call premium and advanced, but they're not, they're not the Phonak Paradise 90 or the Oticon More 1 or the White X Moment 440. There is a differentiation between these products and the, the kind of your Cadillac level of products on the market right now.
Okay, great. Here's a question. How do we find out what products and pricing the TPAs offer in order to attempt to mimic what they have to offer? I know you have some thoughts on that, Will.
Yeah, I mean, it changes all the time. I mean, a lot of these plans follow calendar years where, your Medicare Advantage plan benefits are changing this year. So it's hard to know at any given time what the specific offerings are and the details of those offerings. So I think just more anecdotal kind of information gathering, verification of benefits kind of thing is how we've tried to keep our finger on it. Now, in our practice, we've divested pretty much completely. So when you're not participating, I don't feel like it's your responsibility to have a complete understanding of what any given patient's insurance coverage looks like. If you don't participate, say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't participate in that plan, but we have this plan we developed that's really, very competitive and offers a lot of the same kind of value that a lot of these plans offer, and just kind of speak in general terms. But if somebody wants to figure out exactly what their spend is going to be, they're going to have to call and get referred to an office and kind of go through the process probably to get an actual exact understanding of the financial implications of something like this.
Okay, great. I have two more questions here. So I'm going to ask these two. And then, so I just wanted to, if anyone has any final questions they'd like to ask, feel free to do so now. So this one question is, what is your stance on real ear measurement?
I'm a fan of it. I think it's important. It's a great way to differentiate. If for practices that don't do it. So I think it's great. I think it does. There's some operational challenges if you're going to go really all in with the hearing aid test drive and try different hearing aids. Some people real ear every single time a hearing aid is fit. Some people, they let patients try hearing aids, and then once they've figured out which one they're going to go with, then they do a real ear. So I think there's different ways to do it, but I think in general, it's a good idea.
Okay, great. Then I can answer this question. Is lower hearing aid pricing something Pivot offers to private practices? And I would say, generally speaking, yes. We're one of the largest distributors of hearing aids, if not the largest in the United States. So we have excellent pricing on all of the products from the major manufacturers. So we're happy to chat. Everybody's got their own individual situation with different manufacturers they work with and supply agreements or, deals they work out with their reps. So, everybody's got sort of an individual situation, but that's the kind of thing that setting up a one-on-one call is a great way to discuss and see if there are ways that we can, either match or even beat your existing pricing, as well as enable you to take advantage of the Access Hearing program, as well as all of these other services that we offer that you see here on the screen. Okay, here's another question about the test drive. Do you limit the number of test drives a patient can have? Seems this offering could eat up a lot of appointment times if not.
Yeah, it's a great point. Great question. It can go off the rails if you don't set up some parameters. Yeah. So there's different ways to implement it. So we've got some practices that take different paths. But yeah, what I would recommend is to allow patients to try maybe 2 hearing aid manufacturers. Say, and you can make a wrap for why if a patient wants to try every hearing aid under the sun, that's going to be confusing and not particularly helpful. But based on our professional experience, I think you might do well with one brand or another brand, and let's try them both and see what you think. So yeah, by setting kind of an expectations that it's not going to be every hearing aid under the sun, then I think you can kind of keep it from getting too out of control from a clinic time perspective. So great question.
Okay, great. If there are any last questions, feel free to lob them in now. We are getting close to the hour. So I just want to reiterate that Will and I, our entire team, are available for any questions if you come up with any later as you think about this. We hope you enjoyed the presentation today and learned something. And like I said, really look forward to hopefully meeting you individually, exploring your practice situation, and seeing if there are ways that Pivot Hearing can support you. So thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy day, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Take care.